Hello and welcome. We're going to work on redux-thunk today because redux-thunk allows us to do some asynchronous behaviors inside of Redux, and we need that in order to do things like make HTTP requests. So we're going to do that today, and we're going to hook it up into our app, which is a video game store. So under store, we're going to have an employee and the employee's name, and under cart, we're going to have the customer and the customer's name using this API right here, which is the random user generator. So we'll make they're saying AJAX request, we'll do it with fetch. And we'll reach out to their API. We will get a result, and it'll look like this. They'll have a results array. Inside of there will be individuals, and they will have names. Inside of name, they'll have a first name. And that's what we will use. There's plenty more that you could use in your projects if you want to use this API. So let's get to work by installing our dependency, which is yarn add redux-thunk. Now with that added, I want to put it into Redux right away. Redux-thunk is a middleware, so we need to put it in as a middleware for Redux. The first thing we'll do is import the redux-thunk package from redux-thunk. And the next thing we need to apply this middleware, and fortunately Redux has a function for that. It's called apply middleware. Now we set up with our dev tools here, and we can actually make our apply middleware call inside of our dev tools function. So we're just going to do that. So here inside of it, we're going to apply middleware, which is also a function. Now this function takes all of the middlewares that we're passing in. We're only passing in one middleware, so we could easily just say redux-thunk here. But for the future, in case we decide to add more middlewares, I'd rather make a const called middleware. All undercase like that. That's how I'm going to make it. And then I'm going to make an array. In there, I'll put redux-thunk. And now if I have any other middlewares, I'll just comma and put them in my middleware array. And to apply my middlewares, I'll just use the spread operator, that's ... and then middleware. So the middleware is now spread into the store here that has the create store call. It gives us all of our reducers. It gives us our dev tools and applies our new middleware, redux-thunk. Let's get to work with thunk and look at some of the differences when we start building an action. So in actions, we're going to make an action called user. And this is going to be a file, not an action. There'll be several actions here. User actions.js. Now inside of here is where we're going to do our actions to fetch an employee and to fetch a customer. So we know in these action files, we need to follow best practices and make types at the top, like we did in the cart file where we have add to cart and remove from cart as our action types. So let's make the types right here. I want to call them, how about find employee, and let's comma to find customer from, and then slash, little typo, slash, we should be able to get it from types. Now we can't actually get it from types yet because we didn't put it there, so I'm going to copy these and just put this into types. So here's my copy. I'll go to types, which is in our Redux folder, and I'm just going to paste them right here. We're not done yet. I'm going to grab one of my exports. So I have the alert, and then add to cart, remove from cart. So here will be all of our people exports, all of our user exports. And you could label in between these. Maybe you'd want to say user type, something like that. That might be good for you, just to keep track of everything. Okay, so now we have types for find employee and find customer. Back to our user actions. And now we will export a function. We'll export a const called find employee, and that will equal a fat arrow function. And this is usually how a reducer looks. Now what we're going to do is we're not going to point to our function body, we're going to point to redux-thunk. So that's where we're going to do our async dispatch. After we point async dispatch. And now we point from there to our function. So we have our find employee, which is a function pointing to our asynchronous dispatch, and that's where Thunk is going to help us out. Let's start making our call. We'll need a URL, and if you haven't used the fetch API, we'll go through it right now. So const URL is on this page. Here we are, right where their AJAX request URL is. We'll grab that. I'll paste that in. Now let's do a const set headers. This will be the headers for our request. And in there, we're going to make an object, and headers will be one of the pieces of that object. And then its content type as a string, content dash type, and then its application JSON. That is set. Now we have our URL and our headers. So we're doing a GET request, which means we don't have to specify a method. It automatically does the GET request. So we're going to let res equal await, and I'll explain this right after we do it. So just await fetch, and put in the URL, and then comma2, open up an object, and that's where our headers are going. So set headers. And there we are. So now we're sending in our URL and our headers, and it likely would work just with the URL with the fetch API. We don't need to say that it's a GET request. That's automatic. If we were to do a post or something like that, we would put a method inside of here where we're setting things. We'd make a method that was post, so it knew to do that or delete or whatever it might be. So what we're doing here, let's talk about Async Await real quick. So when we're finding an employee, we're going into a function. This is our middleware function that's async and has dispatch. Now, we're able to use await throughout this entire function now. So when we let res, I'm going to say that's the result basically, we're going to await the fetch of this URL with these headers. And when that comes back, it'll be stored as res. Now, in order to access that, we want res to equal await again, res.json. And this returns a promise too, so you do need to await the res.json, so that returns the JSON in the response there in the res. Let's console.log the res so we can see it. And I'm also going to make something called the let employee. I'm going to make something called the employee. And that'll be res.results at 0, because I just want 1. So what does that mean here? Res.results, that's here. 0 would be the first element in the array, and that's what we'll be passing in, the first element in the array. That's an employee. So we modeled an employee in the data here, and now all we have to do is dispatch this. So let's dispatch, and we'll give it a type of find employee. Perfect. I didn't do that. And we will give it a payload of said employee, which is just labeled employee. So we are now finding an employee and returning it to a reducer that doesn't exist yet. But I'm okay with that because I want to see this console.log res here after we get the JSON back. I want to see what's in there and make sure everything's working. So let's hook this up to our shop. In shop, we're going to bring this in our action. So let's import from up1 to Redux, and then to actions, user actions. Now in user actions, I think we called it find employee. That's what it is. So now we're going to use our find employee on a button, really an input value. Underneath store, let's make a new div. This is where our employee lives here. Inside of this div, we'll say employee name, and we'll give it nothing right now because we're not returning anything from a reducer, which would give us some issues if we just put something in here. So we have employee name, and inside of here, I'm going to do an input because I want to make a button. So we'll have a type equal to submit. And we'll have a value equal to find, let's do capital, find employee. And then finally, we need our onClick, and this is where the magic will happen. So in our onClick, let's equal that up to a anonymous arrow function that returns call for employee. That'll be our function name. And you don't have to pass anything into that. Employee, like so. And I'm going to grab that and we'll make that function. Let's put it under remove cart. Const call for employee is a fat arrow function. And it's a pretty simple function. We already have dispatch here, so we're just going to dispatch find employee, and that's all. So now when we click that button, it's going to return an employee to our console so we can actually see what they look like. Let's head over and give this a shot. I'm just going to yarn start. Great, and now we have this find employee button right here. So I'm going to open up DevTools and take a look in the console. That's where we'll be logging everything. So let's find an employee and see what comes back. We have a results and it has an array of 1. So this is what we're getting, the results. And at 0 is this one person. This one person has a name. Where are you? Name, date of birth, cell. There you are. Mr. Diego Renard. So we want to display Diego right over here next to employee name. So let's get to work on that. We see that our react-redux is working already, but now let's hook it up and maybe even hook it up twice so we can get used to working with react-redux. Let's head over and make a store. We made our action, user actions, go to reducers, and it'll be a user reducer. .js. We're going to need to import the same types that we made before from /types, actually up one, /, and then types. And let's have a const of initial state like we always do. Initial underscore state. You don't have to do this in capitals. I prefer it. You don't have to do that. So we're going to have 2 pieces of state, an employee. The employee has a name that is an object, and inside that object there's a first parameter. So if we go to employee.name.first, we actually get the employee's first name. I'm just going to hold an empty string in there. Now I want to do the same thing again, but this is going to be customer. And then .notation customer.name.first if we need to access this, and we will need to access it on the front end in the shop. So let's do a const of user reducer, and that's going to equal, we'll open this up, the state will be set to initial state at the beginning, and it's going to take actions. So this is no different than regular Redux so far. I know we did this last time. I like to deconstruct the type and the payload off of the action. Just makes our code a little bit cleaner. So type and payload equal action, like so. And we're going to switch over a type. And we'll have cases. So if the type is find employee, what are we going to do? In the case that it is find employee, we're going to return, and inside of there we'll have ... state, comma, and then the employee. That's what we want to be updating, and the employee will be the payload. So on action type find employee, we want to run our find employee case and update the employee. After this, we just have to do our default export. So just default return state. At the end of this, let's export this default and user reducer. Perfect. So that file is all set up, but remember we have a reducer here. Ooh, I spelled the wrong user, reducer. We have a reducer here that is not in our combine reducers call, which lives inside of our root reducer. So we're combine reducers right here. We have our cart reducer, alert reducer. Let's import another one from /reducers/user reducer, and it's called user reducer. Perfect. We'll just comment to it, user reducer, and now the user reducer is working in our app. So let's head back to the shop now. We know that not only are we doing our action, we're dispatching find employee, and it's hitting our reducer, which is getting find employee here. It says use reducer up here. Oh, this is from one of my extensions. It auto imports things. I spelt this use reducer. You didn't miss anything. This shouldn't be here. That's gone. Let's walk through that one more time. We're going from the user actions. We set off the find employee. It hits this switch statement. The case find employee grabs it. It returns the state, and where employee is, it returns the payload that's getting passed from the user action. So we should be able to access employee name first from our user reducer. Let's take a look. In shop, we will take this right here instead of writing it again. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And we wanted employee from the use selector. State will not be cart reducer, it'll be user reducer. Now under that, I'm going to destructure from that as well. And so this is going to equal employee dot name, and the property we want is called first. So that's the employee first name there. I'm going to copy that, bring it on down, and here, employee name, you know what, this was auto-generated, but the space might be helpful. I'm going to leave the space, and I'm going to put it after the employee name, because I can make a space here, pop the employee name as first, like so. And then we'll have a space before this button comes. That's fine with me. Let's take a look. So we have employee name and nothing is there. We have this find employee button. Let's click on it. The employee's name is Harper. So we were able to make a request to random user generator using Redux and Thunk. Let's do it all one more time for practice. We're going to head into our user actions. Now we have this function here, find employee. We're going to do pretty much the same thing. So export const, and let's call it find customer. And we're going to do our fat arrow function, but where does that point? That points to our async dispatch. Our async dispatch is also a fat arrow pointing to our function body. And we have our const URL equal to, this is the random users API, copy and paste that or write it out if you'd like. We can set our headers again. It's a good habit to get into, even though I'm pretty sure this would work if you didn't set the headers for this sort of thing, just doing a GET request from this site. But why chance it? Let's do this correctly. Content type, I like to copy them all the same. Content type application /JSON. Great. And now let's go to let res equal await. So now we're going to await the result of the promise left to us by fetch. It's going to get the URL. We'll open up a object where we're going to put set headers, which is our headers. And then a res equals await res.json. That gives us the JSON from the result. And we will console.log res in case we need it, and we could delete these after. And now we no longer have an employee. Let's let customer equal res.results at 0. And let's finally do our dispatch with all that work done. We know what the type is because we made it already. It's find customer. There we go. And our payload is going to be the customer. Now we need to write this function in our reducer. Let's head over to the user reducer and get that set up. So we have our case find employee. We're going to need another case. So this will be a case find customer. That auto imported for me. You need to put it up here as well. So in the case of find customer, it's going to return ... state again. Then customer will be the payload. And we save that. Now let's put that in our app as well in the shop. It's as simple as copying and pasting this. This isn't what the lesson is about, so we will just copy and paste this sort of thing here under cart, just like we did under store. Paste it in. We have a submit and a value of find customer, and on click call for employees. This should be call for customer. And that ought to do it, except we can't call this first this time. So let's call this something different. There can't be one key for two different values. So we have first. I'm going to call this one customer first. That'll be the customer's first name, and I'll show you how to get this right up on top after we do call for customer. So call for customer. Where is our other one? There we are, call for employee. Const call for customer is a fat arrow function that dispatches find customer. And if you didn't import that, you could import that. I think that would have auto-imported it for me. Let me make sure. Yeah, find customer is coming from your actions, user actions. Okay, so we'll dispatch our find customer there, and what we want to do is get the name so that we could use it down here where we wrote customer first. So I'm going to copy that. That's the customer's first name. So we destructure first off employee.name. The next thing we're going to bring in is customer, and we're not going to destructure first off of it, otherwise we'll have two first. So we're going to const customer first equals customer.name.first, like so. And that ought to do it. Let's see if we hooked that up correctly. Now we have employee. Oh, I don't want to do it like this. This should be customer name. Let's fix that first. Customer name, great. Okay, let's find an employee. Abigail is in the store. And a customer, Amen, has walked in as well. The two A's are getting together and buying some Overwatch, Minecraft, and Fortnite. That worked out perfectly, and I think you have a good view on what's going on with redux-thunk. Redux-thunk allows us to do asynchronous calls. And I was showing you how to do it with Async Await and the fetch API for now. You could still use Async Await and something like Axios, which I personally prefer a lot more than fetch. I like it a lot better. So if you didn't like how fetch worked, in a lot of my other videos, we'll be using Axios. So just pick up on that and make that your go-to. Thanks for being with me on this one. I'm going to keep making them. I might even do Redux Saga if anyone's interested. Great job. I'm going to see you guys on the next one. Have a great day.